Welcome to another OCD Recovery Instagram Live. I'm going to be talking a bit about where you are in the journey, where you are right now, what's involved in this OCD recovery journey. So why is that so important to talk about? Well, I'll tell you why. Because people are all at different stages in this journey and they feel very lost. They feel at parts and they think, I'm never going to get over this section. I'm stuck, I'm alone, I'm different to other people. My story, my journey is different. They're not in that position like me. Maybe you've been therapist to therapist, feeling some relief, but still feeling it lingering in the background. It's still locked on. Maybe you're recovered and you're scared of a relapse. Maybe you're just starting this journey. Why does this matter? Because inside, apart from those reasons I've mentioned, the reason it matters so much is you feel alone. Because this journey is walked by you in your own head. No one's got a thermometer into your head and says, you're feeling like this. Okay, the doctor's checking that against the chart. It doesn't work like that. You might be able to describe your symptoms, but everything is different. Everyone's journey is different. Everyone's different ages, different experiences, different events. All different. That's why it feels alone. Because it's so different, everyone feels like everyone is not sure, especially with a doubting disorder. Where am I? How am I doing? What am I feeling? Am I improving? Am I getting worse? That's the journey. Now you can say, okay, Rob, I read your post and I've got accepting of if I'm doing badly, if I'm doing well, screw it. I'll go along with that. But still, we want to have some idea of what's going along in this journey, okay? Because it's a journey walked alone. I know that alone because I walked that journey. I walked that journey without a community like you guys have today, where it was me going along therapist to therapist, book to book, very bad outline of OCD recovery at that time period. I mean, now it's not ideal, but it's certainly miles out of the dark, and that's what we try and work with every day to change. But in OCD as a whole in the world has improved a long way. But in that time, it wasn't. It was just full of forums, which was no end of reassurance, one forum to another, full of reassurance, not moderated. Most of the books were just talking about thoughts of thoughts. It was a landscape where you felt lost. No wonder this disorder, 15 years ago, whatever time period it was, maybe longer than that, the World Health Organization rated OCD as one of the top 10 most debilitating diseases to have. It's not a disease, but disorder. It got ranked at that for sort of loss of earnings and GDP for companies because of OCD, because they didn't at that point have an understanding of it. They didn't understand. They didn't have very good understanding of exposures, breaking down beliefs, and so on. And obviously, still today, the majority is in the dark when it comes to getting under fears. It's predominantly focused on a thoughts of thoughts angle. Which is a large part of the journey, by all means, which we highlight, but it's by no means all. And that's key. That's absolutely vital, to see how far we've come. I mean, before, if you go back in time, you'd have had SSRIs coming in, which are obviously a game changer for mental health. And, you're only talking the last few decades. And then you go back again, you've got benzodiazepine again, only in a few decades' time. And that was obviously abused because that was a drug that worked instantly and people didn't know of how addictive it was. And even if they did, they abused it. So, it was different times. Then if you went before that, alcohol would have been used. So everyone was just alcoholic. So you'd have said, I know an alcoholic, not someone with OCD. Someone's not going to necessarily tell you they're suffering from POCD as they are today. And obviously the consequences were much harsher back then. You could be burned at the stake as a witch if you'd had OCD in the past and said you had thoughts that you were a witch or possessed by a demon. Wouldn't have gone down so well. Neither would being locked up in a mental asylum, pretty harsh, bleak times in the past. That wouldn't have been ideal either. So you didn't really have many great options compared to today. So you've got to think yourself lucky you're in these times. Now, let's have a look at where we are in the journey. In the journey, you're going to experience all different things. Different people experience all different things with OCD. Some people experience it mainly as a physical form. So they have the thoughts obviously fueling the physical, but then they have mainly physical symptoms that are latched on, pumping away all the time. Somebody else may have got under a lot of the fears, but it's still latched to one fear with chronic guilt persisting for a decade, maybe. You're seeing all variations. I see people come into me that have been to one therapist. See people that come into me that have never been to a therapist. I see people that spent $100,000 in therapy and anxiety centres all around the world, specialists all over the world, and still feel chronic guilt and anxiety 24/7. So you see everything, all different parts of the journey. Now, the journey is going to be different. Some people are going to come in. They may be able to work on their recovery journey in a few months, get 80% relief and go about their life functioning like that for a long time, or forever like that, and they're fine with that. Some people might come in and may need to do a lot more work. They may take them 2 or 3 years to get better. Certainly was my own journey. It wasn't an overnight fix, I can assure you. Spent about 2 years working on disputing irrational beliefs, exposure work, hundreds of exposures, really understanding unconditional self-acceptance as the works of Dr. Albert Ellis, and that was very much needed for me, because I was stuck on false memory real event OCD, latched to the past for years, so it was not budging, and I knew it wasn't budging because I wasn't feeling relief. I went from therapist to therapist, specialist to specialist. But as you know, very few people understand OCD. It's something that is very misunderstood. And I learned some great tools, some very effective tools that helped take the edge off hugely, but didn't get under it. I needed to really understand the teachings of Ellis, which was the unconditional self-acceptance, to get under the chronic guilt and chronic fear that I was feeling all the time. And then the works of Claire Weeks, Paul David, the likes, those characters who were the pioneers of, much more so with Claire Weeks, pioneers of anxiety, as viewing it as a sort of nervous illness and sort of learning to sit with those physical symptoms, especially when I came to experience GAD, generalized anxiety disorder, that came a bit later. So it was a combination of time, persistence, hard work, and all of those areas covered. You can't leave those areas out. People often think, I can skim the books. I can just log into Rob's channel and take a few points and I'll pull it together and off you go. No. OCD recovery is not easy. It requires persistence and work. You will do it, you will achieve it, but you have to put in the work. What tends to happen is a lot of people get better 30, 40% and then coast for years. They get to a point where they're feeling better and then off they go and leave it at that. And then they sort of hover in and out. And the thing with OCD is, everyone's interpretation of OCD is different depending on where they are in the journey. If you're fully recovered, you feel like OCD is harmless. If you're right in it, stuck amongst it, where it's lashing out at you 24/7, you'll feel it's the worst thing ever and it's unbearable. So it depends on the relationship both you have with OCD and the relationship you have with the fears and changes in perspective there. So you've got all those elements that are coming into play. So the journey is something that often people think, it should be this simple. And it's not helped by a lot of websites, of health websites around the world that say things like 6 sessions of CBT, you should do it. And it's absolute nonsense. You wouldn't go to a personal trainer for 6 sessions and expect to be on stage as a fitness competitor. It's not going to happen. You don't have to be that level to recover from OCD either. It varies for different people. You don't have to have unconditional self-acceptance completely bolted down to be recovery. It's certainly not bolting down. That's the opposite. That's a kind of resistance. So you do need to have a good understanding, but you don't have to have it absolutely. You just have to oil the cogs to sort of acceptance. For myself, I had to take it quite a bit further because mine was very, very rigid and tight in there. Wouldn't really give me too much release in other ways. Some people can leave it with uncertainty. Some people can leave it with thoughts. Usually 99% of the time, that's in a sort of milder cases of OCD. It's much more tricky to do it in the sort of more chronic format where most of you are on this page are here. Most people are here and follow me not for the reason that they're going along fine with OCD and it's sort of a little bit bumpy and they're experiencing this journey. It's severely impacting their life where they're thinking, how the bloody hell am I going to make it through 1 day or 1 hour? So I think that's key, those components to sort of highlight, to really sort of really paint a picture of what this disorder does. So you're in a good position now in terms of time, where you're at a time where the disorder is understood by myself, in very much in terms of my own recovery. I'm building this page. I was able to highlight exactly the journey, but it wasn't me. It wasn't me who paved the way for this. I may have contributed to OCD coming out of the dark more, but the teachings of Ellis paved the way, and Claire Weeks paved the way, and before that, Stoicism, Marcus Aurelius, Epictetus, Diogenes, Seneca the Younger, and all of those great philosophers that paved the way before that. So it is understood now in this community that's building with OCD, and it has become and it's understood the majority, a lot of the way, in amongst various OCD specialists, but not by the majority. I'd say 90. No, well, you can't put a figure on this, but as a rule of thumb, if I was just to sort of say it as a sort of just from general experience, most, I would say pretty much 99% of therapists that you meet will not understand OCD to get people recovered in this chronic format. And 99% of specialists don't understand it because you can't get better. I know because I went there and they don't. They have 70 to 80% of the journey covered, but with OCD, until we get it, I mean, if they're not teaching unconditional self and life acceptance from the work of Albert Ellis and Aaron Beck, formed by them to form CBT, which was Albert Ellis formed REBT that then became CBT. If they're not doing that, I can't see how you can get under it. I can't see how you can get under guilt, chronic guilt, in relation to false memory real event. What happens if someone has had a real event? What happens if someone has been involved in a violent crime or has a real disease? Then thoughts obviously doesn't cut it, and so you will need those steps. So I can't see, and the thousands of people that I've worked with over the years can't see, that you will get under it without some understanding of those teachings. Those are vital. So I would say, yes, you have Ellis that laid the foundations, and Claire Weeks and so on, and myself, and others of followers of those teachings, other people that came off the back of Ellis and so on, that understand this and see this. But I can't see, and the whole reason I went into working with OCD was I can't see how without that you will be able to do it, because leaving thoughts there doesn't cut it. It doesn't tend to do it. It still latches on in the background to some degree. So I'd say it's a very, very small community that really do understand OCD. That's not to say that many have huge impact on OCD and are hugely helpful, but unless there is a teaching of unconditional self and life acceptance on some degree, the bottom line is I have never been able to see how people could recover from a chronic format of OCD, especially in relation to false memory, POCD and so on, without those teachings to some degree. Now, that is not all of it. Even if you do have that, there is an element of you've got to come now to understand yourself, understand your own fears, your relationship with anxiety, which then brings together all the great works of Claire Weeks and Paul David and so on, and learning to experience those sensations and feelings. Now, when I was talking about what's the journey like, well, the journey is like this. In our OCD journey, as we go along, we will have different things. Some people will just follow Claire Weeks and will get their anxiety down 60, 70%. I spent years in forums and spoke to many veterans of the sort of anxiety world, guys that had PTSD from being in Vietnam and so on, and all different stories, people with GAD and OCD and PTSD for years and years, and it was very much the understandings of Claire Weeks' teachings at those times that were critical, were crucial. But what people always highlighted was OCD was more sort of was resistant, and it did need a more in-depth, which is obviously where CBT came into it, into getting under those fears. The problem with the modern day CBT is it misses out the elements that were outlined by Albert Ellis, which was the unconditional self and life acceptance, which is so key, as well as the great exercises such as shame attacking and so on, which is all basically just facing fears, seeing them for what they are, and breaking down beliefs, rigid, irrational beliefs that aren't true. That all came from the Stoicism, hence why we incorporate so much of the teachings from Greek and Roman philosophy into it. What is all of that? Well, it's basically just seeing, in nice simple terms, because the whole world likes to make things hugely complicated, it's seeing fears are illusions and seeing things aren't as scary as we think they are, and breaking down those irrational beliefs that contribute to keeping the fear cycle going. I think that's crucial. I think OCD is at a time now where it's changing. And hopefully I'm contributing to that, to making that change, where once it is demonstrated more and more, and in the community that we've done with the Facebook group and all of this with the OCD pages that we run, is highlighting that, you know, it's changing our relationship with anxiety is crucial, but the next part is very much highlighting that it is our beliefs, our irrational beliefs, and the unconditional self-acceptance under it that is the contributor. I'm sorry to dwell on that, but it's so vital, because it's one of the strong messages that I try and put out to change OCD, because it's what's needed. It's not saying that the other stuff doesn't work. It's all part of the puzzle. You could have unconditional self-acceptance nailed down, but be terrible at your relationship with anxiety, and that wouldn't help because you'd be missing the other parts. So you do need these parts. And so in the CBT format that's out there, a lot of the parts are being covered. But the reason people are here is that usually OCD clings and lingers. Now, does that mean that you could use Claire Weekes' book alone for OCD recovery? I would say that will be very, very, very tricky, because what will happen is you will get to points where you will notice a big change in anxiety overall in general, but you will get to points where it will linger. For example, if you had cancer and you'd done a lot of Claire Weekes, getting back to a peaceful state would be very tricky until you change your relationship with death and the cancer. So that is where obviously the CBT element and the works of Albert Ellis and so on come in terms of changing our relationship with that fear, seeing that it's our beliefs about the scenario that keep the cycle going. It's our beliefs contributing it, not the event, the ABCs there. And so that's very key. So you get sort of die-hard fans of Claire Weekes over the years, especially in forums, that sort of Claire Weekes is the all-time 100% cure. Well, it's not as simplistic as that. Same as even if you apply all of the Albert Ellis, that obviously does get under it. But if you apply it too rigidly, then you will stay stuck. Now, that's what he says. So Albert Ellis is obviously, which is the formation of CBT, RBT, is it gets rid of the anxiety, it stops the cycle. But what we tend to do when it comes to OCD, like with any disease or disorder, if you went to a specialist in knees, you would learn not only about the health component that's causing the problem in knees, but you'd learn all other things about how to help your knee in playing tennis, playing golf, whatever. And that's obviously what we try and bring to it here, is that showing ourselves that it is having an in-depth knowledge of OCD for ourselves, so we become our own coaches to ourselves, makes a significant difference, because we're able to apply all the parts of the journey that we're learning and sort of expertise that we take from different elements from other people's struggles. I've learned great things from, say, speaking to a 7-year-old that I was working through, had a great perspective on something of OCD. So we can take these elements from all different people. And as Michael J. Fox said, who has Parkinson's, that he always used to say, well, the experts are the people who have it. Now, obviously, that term people don't like, because they say, well, they're not an expert in terms of being a doctor, and that is absolutely true. Michael J. Fox is by no means is not a medical doctor, but Michael J. Fox is an expert in the condition from his own experience of the disorder in all its parts. He will understand that and know that on a level that the doctor will not know. So we're not ruling out the doctor. The doctor has a good overall general knowledge of all health, but in terms of his experience, same as Paul David. Who was Paul David? He was a guy with anxiety that wrote a book that changed so many people's lives with anxiety, as he had an expert knowledge of anxiety in the forms of generalized anxiety disorder and anxiety symptoms. And that was so crucial to change. I mean, Paul David alone, through that books and his blog and so on at the time, was so significant to anxiety when there was very little on it. So we have to look at it. Same as an athlete. If you look at Michael Jordan, we'll consider him an expert at basketball. He's not a basketball coach, but he has a great knowledge of the game that very few could even understand the way he does and the way he plays. So in life, I think the most important thing is this kind of swarm mentality, where we're taking knowledge from all different people contributing to what we're doing. So when I mean swarm, it's like I'm looking at it like well, it's described like that, as it is like with bees or with animals that are in groups that come together and provide a much better general performance in that situation, because there's so many of them. And that's exactly the way the groups run. You have thousands of people interacting, sharing their stories, their wisdom and so on. You know how much amazing information you're getting there. The same as in the WhatsApp groups. You're getting people that have read, say one person's read 10 books, another's read 10, another read 10. They've got 100 books of facts and knowledge and summary coming at you that's really going into that specifically. So it's vital to surround yourselves by people that are both knowledgeable about OCD but also committed to recovery, because you can go in forums and meet loads of people that are very negative, not go any direction with where they want to go with OCD. You're going to learn very little there. You're only going to prop each other up with stories of, you've got that symptom, I've got that symptom, oh that's bad, and which is the cycle that they've operated in for years, which is no good. We do not want that. We want positive reinforcement from others of things they've learned that have been positive and productive to their lives with OCD. So I think that's very, very important. So that sort of lays out what's going on. Now, with OCD in the journey, where I started off before I went sort of a little bit off topic there, but I thought it was important, is what you're seeing also happen is with OCD, because it sort of hammers away and makes things feel so difficult. It's very easy to think you're at square one, especially after a setback, thinking you're at square one again all the time, constantly. Am I at square one? Forget square one. There's no square one. The beginning of this video was I started this video. You could say that was square one of the video. But now I've carried on talking. My knowledge of speaking on this video has now changed because I've just spoken about this video and seen how this video has gone. The same as if there's no point in time that's ever square one. 1 second that follows another second is different. If I sit here drinking a cup of tea, at the end of the cup of tea, I'm not at square one. I'm at the same time because time is constantly changing. There is never a square one, ever. So even if you stumble in OCD, you're just learning a new part. And the way that I changed my perspective in the OCD journey that was absolutely vital was realizing that every challenge and experience that I had during the OCD journey, whether I was stuck, triggered or whatever, these were all just OCD fears which at that point had got a grip, and I had to use them as challenges to pave the way to recovery. So that's what they were. They were all stepping stones to the overall recovery journey. So you need to view it like that. And you need to take your time and view this as a long-term thing. You can't sprint a marathon. If you try and sprint a marathon, you burn out. And that is definitely the approach many people go with. And especially with so many nonsense accounts online saying like break free from OCD in 5 days or stuff like that, which just leaves people feeling stuck and hopeless. We always talk about why you can't put deadlines on OCD recovery. You see that on sites as well and social media. People saying, put a deadline, set yourself a month and then be better, and you're guaranteed to be better if you do X amount of exposure. It's absolute nonsense. So there's all of that too. So OCD recovery, you're going to need to learn a lot about OCD, and you're going to need to hear things that are different to what you've already heard. Because if you're just hearing all the time thoughts are thoughts, leave thoughts flow in, flow out, it's not as simplistic as that. It's oversimplified. The problem with that is it leaves people feeling alone when it doesn't work. It's not as simplistic as that. If it was, someone would get a cancer diagnosis, someone would walk out the door, someone would just say, sit and breathe and relax in that room all day, today, tomorrow, the next day, and you'll feel better. It's not like that. The person has to think about their life. They have to change their perspectives on life. They have to go through feelings of anger and anxiety and changing and seeing how they're viewing their life and lives of others and their life in general, and all these different elements that come together to form acceptance, giving up that internal resistance inside which propels the anxiety cycle along. Right, now let me just go to some of these questions, which is probably a lot. Let's have a look here. Give me a second to do these. First one, mine just seems to be getting worse. It's only because of perspective, so it feels like that because of anxiety's got a hold. It doesn't get worse on its own. There's a contributing factor, a belief. There's a belief in there that's fueling it. Over 20 years ago, my only options of community was a pen pal service. Yeah, well, that is unfortunately the way it was. What about ERP? ERP is a crucial part. Facing fears, that's all it is. Facing fears in reality. There's nothing more than that. Often the names make things feel so much more confusing. CBT, ERP, everything. What is it? It's just facing a fear. I like to keep it in simple terms. Just facing a fear, seeing things for what it is, changing our relationship with that. It's not oversimplifying it, it's describing it what it is. Do I believe or follow any religion? No, I was religious up until the age of 18. And I then, through disputing my beliefs in relation to religion, because I was religious at the time, I gave up on religion. I didn't believe it any longer. You don't need to give up on religion to recover from religious OCD, but it was the way I did it, by breaking down the irrational belief, which religion by definition is an irrational belief. So by breaking that down, then I lost that. But you can go with the uncertainty and so on with religion. I work with many people who are religious. They do not have to give up that. We should change the name of OCD. It's way worse than the common disorder. I would disagree. I think the name also makes people feel more stuck. I know it's a disorder. I think the names are all awful. I don't hate the name for the type of PTSD. Complex PTSD makes people feel extremely stuck and lost. I hate pure OCD. Awful name. Makes people think it's a pure concentrated form that's so difficult to recover from, a different, more harder, resistant form. It's not that at all. I think that name should go. I've many times on Twitter, I've done hashtags to drop that name, saying to people to drop it and get rid of the name. The themes as well, they're good for describing. It's better to say I have a sexual fear OCD thought, I have a harm related thought or something like that than themes. Forget all of it, overcomplicates it, none of it makes any sense. It's a long pattern of making ourselves feel more alone, and it was just names that people coined at the time. And the problem with names is someone coins them, they then become a name, and then everyone just abides by it and goes by it, and that's not what should happen. A name that doesn't work anymore should not be. We should say that, look, pure OCD is a nonsense name that does nothing for it. Yes, people will say it helped me to understand it, but that's only because OCD is not explained to people properly. If it was explained to people properly, there would be no need for a term like pure OCD. It's the same as with a religion and atheism. There should be no such thing as atheism. There should just be, I don't believe in a God, right? I don't believe in a religion. There shouldn't be a name for that. It's like saying, do you believe in dogs? If you do, there's a name for it, and if you don't, you don't. You don't need a describing word. You can just say, I do believe in dogs, or I don't. I've seen a dog, or whatever, or some version of that. It's probably not the best analogy to describe that, but you can get an idea of what I'm trying to say here. Let's have a look. I've never seen anywhere talking about unconditional self-acceptance other than your channel. Well, it's in the teachings, the original teachings by Albert Ellis at Form CBT. It is there. It's just not followed usually because people don't understand it. But that's what we raise awareness for, of getting that more understood. But even when it's understood, it's how it's applied and really getting in there and using it. That's key. His book is not talking about OCD, only about unconditional. That's absolutely correct. His book is not specifically for OCD, it's for life. That's where people mistake things. They think OCD is something separate. No, life. We all live life, okay? So our fears are life fears. So all the books apply to anything. All OCD and anxiety is being scared of things in life. That's all it is. My book that I'm bringing out will be focusing on specifically OCD and all about OCD and how we apply this and use this. But the books work just the same. The Albert Ellis books work just the same. It's focusing on life fears. Unconditional self-acceptance works for life. In relation to those questions, does it work for ... Read the books, don't listen to them. You won't be able to get it as well. You need to see it on paper, highlight things and read things again and read things over. The person who keeps asking the repeat question there about unconditional self-acceptance. Well, let's get rid of the word unconditional self-acceptance. Let's get rid of anything. What is life? Life is us as a human going about our day-to-day life, okay? Living. What are we? We're a human, just on this planet. We have made up all the rest. I am good because I do this. I am bad because I've done that. I need this thing called self-esteem to be a this, and I need to achieve that. All of that. All that nonsense we invented. This is removing all the nonsense and showing us what is life, what is reality. Okay, we're calling it unconditional self-acceptance, all these different things. It's learning to just be human and live. Hence why I break things down and just say, learning to see things rationally, learning to be at peace with how we are. All these names, all these books, all these things, it's all so much removed. Like Alan Watts used to say, it's all this stuff we're adding to the puzzle all the time. You know, Alan Watts' quote or something was, I can't remember it exactly to quote it in a way that would be good because I can't, but I can't remember it exactly. But he was talking about we spend our whole lives trying to define ourselves. And I mean, why? What? We're human. We're just a human, just sitting here talking. I'm just a human breathing and sitting and talking. I say I was a great footballer. So what? I'm a great footballer. Caveman didn't even know about football. He wouldn't have recognised it. It's only because we recognise it. So all these things we add to it is us adding to the picture. I must achieve this. I must do that. I must be a this. I must be a that. When you remove it all, you get peace. Because you realise there's nothing you need to go and rush to do and rush around all day long to be a something to get peace. You don't need to. But it's that chasing that's the problem. That constant chasing. And it's learning to see that there's no good or bad people. There's no awful thing that's so unbearable that we can't stand it, only our perspective of it. ... Carried on, all of that. And that's what Albert Ellis does. He takes the Stoicism, the great works of Marcus Aurelius and so on, and brings it and packages it up into that format that helps us to understand all these things. A lot of things are very similar. You have many similar things in Buddhism. You have many similar things in mindfulness and meditation. But when it's packaged well like this in those teachings, hence why CBT is the gold standard, has been regarded as the gold standard for long, because it gets in. But what is CBT? CBT is just seeing fears aren't what we think they are. That's all. That's all it is. Seeing fears aren't what they think we are, and changing our behaviours accordingly by changing our beliefs. I thought I would come on here and do a quick video, but that's seemed to be a bit longer. I will be back on here covering different topics. I'm going to do a video talking about why we need to give up pure OCD. And I'm going to try and get this name to sort of fizzle out, because I can't see any reason for upholding the word pure OCD. Some people will say, yes, pure OCD is a good name to keep for X, Y, Z. I've never seen any evidence for the answers given that contribute to keeping it. I think the name is a disaster. I think it's a name that leaves people feeling completely lost and stuck. It needs to change. I will be covering that in the next video. Guys, great to see you all here, on here, and I will be back on again soon. All right, guys, see you later. Bye.